Failure has a strange way of making people question everything. Your confidence disappears. Your energy fades. The vision you once carried with certainty suddenly feels distant and impossible. And the hardest part is not losing something externally. The hardest part is looking at yourself differently afterward. But failure does not destroy people. What destroys people is the meaning they attach to failure. Some people experience one setback and spend years convincing themselves they are no longer capable. They stop trusting their decisions. They stop taking risks. They shrink their ambitions to protect themselves from future disappointment. Slowly, fear becomes their identity. But strong people understand something different. Failure is not proof that you are weak. Failure is proof that growth has begun. Every meaningful transformation starts with disruption. Every person who becomes mentally strong eventually experiences a season where life humbles them, a season where effort feels less invisible, a season where confidence must be rebuilt from nothing. And this is where most people walk away, because rebuilding yourself is not exciting in the beginning. It is repetitive, it is uncomfortable, it is lonely. Nobody applauds discipline while you are still struggling. Nobody celebrates the mornings you force yourself to continue despite exhaustion. Nobody notices the internal battles you fight to stay focused when disappointment still lives inside your mind. But that is exactly where transformation begins. The strongest version of yourself is not created during comfort. It is created during recovery. When failure breaks your ego, you finally become teachable. You begin to see the habits that held you back. You notice the distractions that stole your focus. You recognize the emotional patterns that weakened your discipline. Pain exposes truth quickly, and truth becomes power when you are willing to face it honestly. Rebuilding yourself starts with accepting responsibility, not blame, responsibility. Blame keeps people trapped in bitterness. Responsibility gives people control again. The moment you say, "My future is still in my hands," your comeback begins. You do not need to rebuild your entire life in one day. You rebuild through small actions repeated consistently. One disciplined morning, one focused decision, one promise kept to yourself, one moment of courage when quitting feels easier. Confidence is not built by motivation. Confidence is built by evidence. Every time you follow through despite resistance, you teach your mind that you can trust yourself again. That trust changes everything, because eventually discipline becomes identity. The habits that once felt difficult become automatic. The pain that once felt unbearable becomes wisdom. The weakness that once embarrassed you becomes the very thing that teaches you resilience. And one day, people will look at your success without understanding the suffering that created it. They will see the comeback, but not the lonely nights. They will see the confidence, but not the fear you fought through. They will see the results, but not the internal rebuilding that happened long before success became visible. That is why patience matters. Real growth happens invisibly at first. A tree grows underground before anyone sees it above the surface. Strength develops internally before it appears externally. The same is true for people. Your rebuilding season may feel slow, but invisible progress is still progress. Do not rush the process. The goal is not to become who you were before failure. The goal is to become someone stronger because of it, someone calmer under pressure, someone more disciplined during uncertainty. Someone who no longer depends on external validation to keep moving forward. Because true strength is not avoiding failure. True strength is refusing to stay broken after failure is not your identity. Yet millions of people wake up every morning carrying failure like a permanent label attached to their name. Studies on human behavior consistently show that people remember negative experiences far longer than positive ones, and the mind naturally magnifies setbacks more than victories. One painful moment can overshadow years of progress if a person allows emotion to become stronger than perspective. That is why so many people stop chasing growth after disappointment. They do not fail because they are incapable. They fail because they begin believing the failure is who they are. The dangerous part about failure is not the event itself. It is the story people create afterward. A business collapses, and suddenly a person calls himself unsuccessful. A relationship ends, and someone begins believing they are unworthy of love. One rejection convinces a person to stop trying completely. The human mind often turns temporary situations into permanent conclusions. This is how confidence slowly disappears. Not because of reality, but because of repeated self-definition. History repeatedly proves that the people who create extraordinary results are rarely the people who avoided failure. They are the people who refuse to identify with it. Athletes lose championships. Leaders make mistakes. Entrepreneurs experience collapse. Creators face rejection for years before recognition arrives. Yet the difference between those who rebuild and those who surrender comes down to one internal decision. Strong people separate their identity from their circumstances. Failure is feedback. Failure is exposure. Failure is information. But failure is never identity. When people tie their worth to outcomes, every setback becomes emotional destruction. They stop seeing themselves as human beings learning through experience and start seeing themselves as broken. This mindset creates fear, hesitation, and emotional paralysis. Instead of adapting, they retreat. Instead of rebuilding, they hide. Instead of learning, they spend years protecting their ego from discomfort. But growth has never been created through protection. Growth begins the moment a person becomes emotionally strong enough to face truth without collapsing internally. That truth may reveal poor discipline, weak habits, lack of patience, emotional inconsistency, or fear of uncertainty. But awareness is powerful. Most people remain trapped because they spend more time defending their weaknesses than improving them. The strongest people do the opposite. They accept failure without allowing it to define their future. They study it carefully. They ask difficult questions. They become honest about what must change. This level of self-awareness becomes the foundation of transformation. Research in psychology continually shows that resilience is not built through comfort or constant success. Resilience develops through recovery. Human beings become mentally stronger after adversity when they learn how to adapt inside of emotionally surrendering. This is why painful seasons often produce wiser, calmer, and more disciplined individuals later in life. Failure forces people to confront reality. It removes illusion. It exposes character under pressure. And while painful, that process often creates deeper emotional strength than easy victories ever could. Many people are waiting to feel confident again before taking action. But confidence does not appear first. Action creates confidence. Momentum rebuilds belief. Discipline restores identity. Every small promise kept to yourself becomes evidence that you are still capable of growth. One decision at a time, people rebuild themselves. One focused morning, one disciplined routine, one difficult conversation, one courageous step despite fear. This is how identity changes. Not through words, but through repeated behavior over time. The problem is that most people want visible progress immediately. They expect transformation to happen quickly enough for others to notice. But real rebuilding happens internally long before the world sees results. Strength develops quietly. Emotional maturity develops privately. Discipline grows invisibly before success becomes public. That is why patience matters during difficult seasons. A person rebuilding after failure is not starting from zero. They are starting from experience. They are starting from wisdom gained through pain. And wisdom changes the way future decisions are made. Failure may interrupt a chapter of life, but it does not have the authority to define the entire story. Pain can become a teacher when a person stops asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and starts asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" Human behavior research continues to show that adversity changes the brain, strengthens emotional endurance, and often becomes the turning point behind long-term personal growth. Many of the world's most resilient individuals died. I did not become strong because life was easy. They became strong because difficulty forced them to adapt, reflect, and evolve under pressure. Most people spend their lives trying to avoid pain completely. They see discomfort as punishment instead of preparation. The moment life becomes difficult, they panic emotionally, lose direction, and search for immediate escape. But pain has always carried information. It reveals what comfort hides. It exposes weak discipline, emotional instability, unhealthy habits, poor environments, and false priorities. Pain forces honesty where ego once created illusion. That is why difficult seasons often become the greatest periods of transformation. A person who experiences rejection begins understanding emotional resilience. Someone who loses everything financially starts learning the value of discipline and patience. An athlete recovering from defeat develops mental toughness that victory alone could never provide. Erring removes distraction. It forces people to confront reality directly. The human mind naturally remembers painful experiences more deeply than pleasurable ones. Scientists studying emotional memory repeatedly find that difficult experiences leave stronger mental imprints because the brain prioritizes survival and learning from threats. This explains why one painful moment can influence behavior for years. But that same mechanism can also create wisdom when pain is processed correctly. Some people become bitter from suffering, others become wiser. The difference is reflection. Pain without reflection creates anger. Pain with reflection creates growth. Many people experience hardship but never pause long enough to understand what the experience revealed about them. Instead of learning, they distract themselves. Instead of healing, they numb themselves emotionally. Instead of rebuilding, they blame circumstances endlessly. Temporary comfort becomes more important than long-term treatment. Transformation. But strong people use pain differently. They allow hardship to sharpen their awareness. They study their reactions under pressure. They observe where fear controls them. They identify habits that weaken them. Pain becomes a mirror showing exactly what must improve. This is why emotionally mature people stop running from discomfort. They understand that some lessons only arrive through adversity. Patience is learned through waiting. Courage is developed through fear. Discipline is created through resistance. Emotional strength is built through recovery after disappointment. Life often teaches through contrast. People understand peace after chaos. They value loyalty after betrayal. They appreciate health after sickness. They recognize opportunity after loss. Pain creates perspective because it removes the illusion that everything will always remain stable. And stability was never guaranteed. Every human being eventually faces seasons that test identity, belief, and emotional control. Some lose careers. Others lose relationships. Some battle failure privately while still appearing strong publicly. Pain arrives differently for everyone, but its purpose often remains the same. It forces growth where comfort created stagnation. The strongest individuals are rarely the ones who avoided hardship. They are the ones who refuse to waste it. Every painful experience contains instruction. Sometimes it teaches boundaries. Sometimes it teaches humility. Sometimes it teaches patience, discipline, or emotional control. But the lesson only appears when a person becomes willing to listen instead of complaining constantly. Growth begins the moment responsibility replaces victim mentality. A person cannot control every painful experience, but they can control the meaning they attach to it. One individual allows suffering to destroy confidence completely. Another uses the exact same pain as fuel for transformation. The circumstance may be identical, but the mindset changes everything. Pain also reveals hidden strength people never knew existed. During easy seasons, most individuals underestimate their own resilience because life never demanded more from them. But hardship forces capability to emerge. Human beings often discover courage, endurance, and discipline only after difficulty leaves them no other option. That is why some of the strongest people carry the deepest scars, not because pain made them weak, but because surviving it revealed strength they had never developed before. Every difficult season reshapes perspective. Every setback carries a lesson. Every painful chapter contains the possibility of wisdom for those willing to grow through it instead of collapsing beneath it. Pain may arrive uninvited, but transformation begins when suffering becomes instruction instead of identity. Rebuilding starts in silence because real transformation rarely happens in front of an audience. Human behavior studies consistently show that meaningful personal change is usually formed through private repetition, emotional discipline, and long periods of invisible effort. Most people admire success publicly, but they underestimate the lonely process required to create it. Behind every powerful comeback exists a season where progress could not yet be seen, understood, or validated by others. The modern world rewards visibility. People are encouraged to announce goals before building discipline. They post ambition before creating habits. They seek recognition before earning results. But silent rebuilding follows a different path. It focuses less on appearance and more on identity. Instead of chasing applause, a person begins strengthening the foundation nobody else can see. This is where true growth begins. Silence removes distraction. It creates space for reflection. It forces people to confront themselves honestly without relying on external validation to maintain motivation. Many individuals struggle during quiet seasons because silence exposes thoughts they normally avoid. Regret becomes louder. Fear becomes clearer. Doubt becomes difficult to escape. Yet this discomfort often becomes the starting point of transformation. A person rebuilding their life quietly is usually fighting battles nobody understands. They are rebuilding confidence after disappointment. They are restoring discipline after failure. They are trying to regain belief after emotional exhaustion. And while the outside world may see no visible progress, internal reconstruction is already happening. Research on habit formation repeatedly confirms that lasting behavioral change depends more on consistency than intensity. Small, repeated actions reshape identity over time. Silent rebuilding follows this principle perfectly. Waking up earlier, staying disciplined privately, reading instead of complaining, exercising despite low motivation, practicing emotional control during difficult moments. None of these actions attract immediate attention, but together they create long-term transformation. Most people quit because silent progress feels invisible. Human beings naturally crave evidence that effort is working. When results do not appear quickly, discouragement grows. This is why many people abandon their goals too early. They confuse invisibility with failure. But nature itself demonstrates a different truth. Roots grow underground long before trees become visible above the surface. Foundations are built before structures rise. Internal strength develops before external success appears. The same pattern exists in human growth. A disciplined individual often spends months rebuilding mentally before life begins changing externally. Emotional stability forms quietly. Focus sharpens gradually. Confidence returns slowly through repeated action. None of this looks impressive in the beginning, but invisible progress eventually. Ally produces visible outcomes. Silence also protects growth from unnecessary interference. Not every goal requires public discussion. Not every dream benefits from outside opinion. Constantly explaining plans can drain energy that should be invested into execution. Strong people understand that speaking less and building more creates stronger momentum than seeking approval prematurely. This does not mean isolation forever. It means understanding the difference between performing growth and actually experiencing it. Many individuals become addicted to appearing productive instead of becoming disciplined. They announce plans repeatedly but struggle with follow-through privately. Silent rebuilding removes this performance mindset. It replaces attention-seeking behavior with internal accountability. A person learns to continue working even when nobody notices. That level of discipline changes identity permanently. Psychologists studying delayed gratification repeatedly find that people, the capable of sacrificing short-term emotional rewards, often create stronger long-term outcomes. Silence is part of that sacrifice. It requires patience without applause, effort without recognition, commitment without immediate evidence. This is why rebuilding seasons often feel lonely. The world usually celebrates people after success arrives, not during the difficult process that created it. Nobody sees the early mornings filled with self-doubt. Nobody notices the emotional control required to keep moving despite discouragement. Nobody applauds consistency when results are still invisible. Yet those quiet moments shape the future more than public victories ever could. Silence becomes powerful because it strengthens self-respect internally. A person no longer depends entirely on external praise to continue improving. Their motivation becomes rooted in purpose instead of attention. Discipline becomes personal instead of performative. And eventually the silent rebuilding phase ended. Results begin appearing. Confidence returns naturally. Strength becomes visible through behavior, energy, and emotional stability. Others suddenly notice the transformation, often assuming it happened quickly. But real rebuilding never happens overnight. It happens slowly, privately, and repeatedly through choices made during silent seasons when nobody else was watching. The strongest comebacks are usually built far away from applause, inside moments of solitude where character is reconstructed one disciplined decision at a time. Confidence is earned again through action, because the human mind trusts evidence more than emotion. Psychological research consistently shows that self-belief grows from repeated experiences of follow-through, not from positive thinking alone. Many people wait for confidence before they begin rebuilding their lives, but confidence rarely appears first. Action creates momentum, and momentum slowly restores belief. The individuals who recover after failure are usually not the ones who feel fearless. They are the ones who continue moving despite fear. After disappointment, confidence often disappears quietly. A person starts questioning their decisions, abilities, and future potential. One failed attempt suddenly feels bigger than years of effort. The mind begins replaying mistakes repeatedly, turning temporary setbacks into permanent doubt. This is why many people become emotionally stuck after failure. They stop taking action because they no longer trust themselves. But confidence was never meant to come from comfort. True confidence is built through proof. A person becomes confident in discipline by practicing consistency. A speaker becomes confident by speaking repeatedly. An athlete rebuilds confidence through training. A leader regains confidence by making difficult decisions under pressure. Every form of self-belief grows through repeated action over time. The dangerous mistake many people make is depending entirely on motivation. Motivation changes daily because emotions change daily. Some mornings people feel focused, inspired, and determined. Other mornings they feel exhausted, discouraged, and uncertain. If action depends completely on emotion, progress becomes unstable. Strong individuals understand that discipline matters more than temporary feelings. This is where rebuilding begins. One small action repeated consistently starts changing identity internally. Waking up on time even when energy feels low. Finishing tasks despite self-doubt. Returning to routines after failure instead of quitting permanently. Each action sends a message to the brain that growth is still possible. Human behavior studies repeatedly confirm that repeated behavior reshapes self-perception. People begin seeing themselves differently when actions consistently align with discipline and responsibility. Confidence becomes stronger because behavior creates evidence. The mind slowly stops, focusing only on past mistakes and starts recognizing present effort. That process takes time. Most people expect confidence to return instantly, but rebuilding trust in yourself follows the same pattern as rebuilding trust with another person. Consistency matters more than promises. Repeated action matters more than intention. Saying, "I will change," means little without behavior supporting those words. This is why small victories matter during difficult seasons. A single productive morning may seem insignificant, but psychologically it interrupts helplessness. One completed task creates momentum for another. One disciplined decision strengthens emotional control slightly more. Over time, these repeated actions accumulate into identity transformation. Confidence also grows when people stop avoiding discomfort. Fear often becomes stronger through avoidance. The longer a person delays difficult conversations, challenges, or responsibilities, the heavier those situations feel mentally. But action weakens fear. The moment movement begins, uncertainty loses some of its control. That is why courageous people are not necessarily fearless people. Courage usually means acting while fear still exists. Many individuals believe confidence belongs only to naturally gifted or successful people. But confidence is often the result of repeated exposure to difficulty. Athletes develop it through training pressure. Entrepreneurs develop it through setbacks and adaptation. Leaders develop it through responsibility and decision-making under uncertainty. The process is uncomfortable because rebuilding confidence requires facing situations where failure previously existed. A person afraid of rejection must risk rejection again. Someone recovering after failure must attempt progress again. Avoidance may protect emotions temporarily, but it also prevents growth permanently. Action changes emotional state faster than overthinking. Overthinking traps people inside imagined scenarios, fears, and worst-case outcomes. Action interrupts mental paralysis because movement creates focus. Even imperfect progress creates more emotional strength than endless hesitation. This is why disciplined routines become powerful during rebuilding seasons. Exercise, reading, structured work, focused habits, and controlled environments create stability when emotions feel chaotic. Repetition strengthens self-respect because people begin proving reliability to themselves again. And self-respect changes everything. The strongest confidence does not come from external praise, social attention, or temporary success. It comes from knowing internally that you can rely on yourself under pressure. It comes from continuing despite difficulty. It comes from repeated evidence that setbacks no longer control your behavior. Confidence is rarely restored through waiting, thinking, or wishing. It is rebuilt quietly through action repeated long enough. For belief to return naturally through experience rather than words. Discipline creates emotional stability because the human mind performs better with structure than chaos. Behavioral psychology consistently shows that routines, repeated habits, and controlled actions reduce emotional overwhelm and strengthen mental resilience during stressful periods. Many people believe emotions control behavior, but in reality, behavior often shapes emotions more powerfully than they realize. When discipline disappears, emotional instability grows. When structure returns, the mind slowly regains control. Modern life constantly pulls attention in different directions. Notifications interrupt focus. Entertainment replaces reflection. Instant gratification weakens patience. Many individuals wake up reacting emotionally instead of living intentionally. Their mood controls their schedule. Their motivation controls their effort. Their feelings decide whether important work gets completed. This creates Emotional inconsistency, because emotions naturally fluctuate throughout the day. Strong people understand something different. Discipline creates stability even when emotions feel unstable. A person with disciplined habits does not depend entirely on feeling motivated before taking action. They follow routines because structure protects them from emotional chaos. Waking up consistently, exercising regularly, controlling distractions, and following commitments creates psychological order. That order strengthens emotional control over time. Research on human performance repeatedly confirms that predictable routines reduce stress and decision fatigue. When the brain does not constantly waste energy deciding what to do next, mental clarity improves. Discipline removes unnecessary confusion by creating direction. Instead of reacting impulsively to emotions, disciplined individuals move according to principles and habits. This becomes especially important during difficult seasons. Fail. Your uncertainty, heartbreak, financial pressure, and disappointment often create emotional turbulence. People who lack structure during those moments become vulnerable to destructive habits. Sleep patterns collapse, focus disappears, productivity weakens. Emotional reactions become stronger than logical thinking. Without discipline, temporary pain easily turns into long-term instability. But disciplined behavior creates emotional anchors. A morning routine provides consistency during uncertainty. Exercise releases mental tension and strengthens resilience. Focused work creates purpose when emotions feel scattered. Healthy habits stabilize energy and attention, but they prevent emotions from controlling every decision. That is why discipline often creates peace before success arrives. They believe money, relationships, recognition, or achievement will finally make them feel calm internally. But external conditions constantly change. Stability built only on circumstances becomes fragile. Discipline creates something stronger because it develops internal control independent of temporary situations. The strongest individuals are usually not the people with perfect lives. They are the people with strong routines during imperfect seasons. Human beings naturally seek comfort, especially during stress. But comfort without discipline often creates weakness instead of recovery. Excessive distraction, laziness, emotional impulsiveness, and avoidance temporarily numb discomfort while silently increasing long-term anxiety. This is why many people feel emotionally exhausted despite constantly seeking convenience. Discipline interrupts that cycle. Choosing difficult but productive action strengthens emotional endurance. Finishing responsibilities despite low motivation teach. Ease the brain resilience. Delayed gratification improves patience. Controlled habits reduce impulsive reactions. Over time, emotional stability grows because the person becomes less controlled by temporary feelings. This does not mean disciplined people never feel fear, sadness, frustration, or doubt. It means they develop systems strong enough to continue functioning despite those emotions. Emotional maturity is not the absence of difficult feelings. It is the ability to manage behavior wisely while emotions exist. That ability changes every area of life. Disciplined people usually recover faster from setbacks because structure keeps them moving forward. They are less likely to collapse completely after disappointment because habits continue providing momentum. While others stop functioning emotionally during hard seasons, disciplined individuals maintain enough control to rebuild steadily. Studies on resilience repeatedly show that people who maintain routines during stressful periods. ODs often experience stronger psychological recovery than those who abandon structure completely. Consistency protects mental health because repeated action creates stability for the nervous system and mind. Discipline also strengthens self-respect. Every promise kept to yourself becomes evidence of reliability. Every completed task reinforces trust internally. Over time, people stop seeing themselves as emotionally reactive individuals and begin seeing themselves as dependable, focused, and capable. That internal identity matters deeply, because emotional stability is rarely created through motivation speeches or temporary inspiration alone. It is built slowly through repeated disciplined choices made during ordinary days. Small actions become habits. Habits become character. Character becomes emotional strength, and eventually discipline no longer feels restrictive. It feels freeing because the person is no longer controlled entirely by moods, distractions, impulses, or temporary emotional storms. Structure creates calm. Consistency creates control. Discipline creates emotional stability strong enough to survive pressure without breaking. Internally, your environment shapes recovery because human behavior is deeply influenced by the people, habits, conversations, and surroundings experienced daily. Psychological and behavioral studies consistently show that environment affects motivation, emotional resilience, decision-making, and long-term personal growth more than most people realize. A person trying to rebuild after failure while surrounded by negativity, distraction, and unhealthy influences faces a much harder battle than someone supported by discipline, encouragement, and purpose-driven energy. Many people underestimate how strongly environments shape identity. Over time, attitudes become contagious. Energy transfers between people. Mindsets spread through repeated exposure. A person surrounded constantly by excuses eventually begins justifying their own lack of action. Someone surrounded by discipline often starts becoming more disciplined naturally. Human beings adapt to what they repeatedly experience. This is why recovery becomes difficult in toxic environments. A person trying to regain confidence cannot heal properly while constantly hearing discouragement. Someone rebuilding emotionally struggles when surrounded by criticism, comparison, or chaos. The environment continuously reinforces either growth or stagnation. Every conversation, routine, habit, and influence slowly shapes mental direction. The brain absorbs patterns from surroundings more than people notice consciously. Research on social influence repeatedly confirms that individuals often mirror the emotional behaviors, expectations, and standards of those closest to them. This explains why certain environments inspire growth, while others quietly destroy ambition. Some environments strengthen, then focus. Others normalize mediocrity. A disciplined environment creates accountability. It encourages consistency, emotional control, and long-term thinking. A destructive environment increases distraction, impulsiveness, and emotional instability. Over time, these influences shape not only behavior but also identity. This becomes extremely important after failure. When people experience disappointment, they become emotionally vulnerable. Doubt increases. Confidence weakens. During these seasons, the surrounding environment becomes even more powerful because emotional states are easier to influence under stress. Negative people can deepen hopelessness. Distracting habits can delay recovery. Constant comparison can destroy motivation completely. That is why strong people protect their environment carefully during rebuilding seasons. They become intentional about what enters their mind daily. They reduce exposure to negativity. They spend less time around people committed to cause, laning without changing. They avoid environments built around distraction and emotional chaos. Instead, they seek spaces that strengthen focus, discipline, and emotional clarity. This does not always mean physically leaving everyone behind. Sometimes it means creating boundaries. Sometimes it means changing routines. Sometimes it means limiting conversations that drain energy repeatedly. Recovery requires protection because growth is fragile during the beginning stages. Many people fail to rebuild because they attempt transformation while remaining completely surrounded by the same habits, influences, and distractions that contributed to their collapse initially. But environments reinforce behavior patterns continuously and mentally. Change becomes difficult when the surroundings constantly pull a person backward emotionally and mentally. The strongest recoveries often begin with environmental shifts. A cleaner space creates mental clarity. A disciplined schedule creates stability. Friendships encourage better choices. Productive routines strengthen emotional control. Positive influences create momentum toward improvement instead of self-destruction. Human beings naturally rise or fall toward the standards surrounding them most frequently. This is why high-performing athletes train around other disciplined athletes. Strong leaders often surround themselves with focused individuals. Growth-oriented people intentionally seek environments where accountability and ambition feel normal. Environment affects belief. When a person constantly hears limitation, excuses begin sounding reasonable. When someone repeatedly experiences encouragement, possibility becomes easier to believe. Energy matters because repeated exposure shapes emotional patterns over time. Digital environments also influence recovery deeply. Constant negativity online, endless comparison, and addictive distraction weaken focus and emotional stability. Many people spend hours consuming content that increases anxiety, insecurity, and mental exhaustion without realizing its impact gradually. Strong individuals become selective with what they consume mentally. They protect attention because attention shapes thought patterns. Thought patterns influence actions. Actions create identity. Recovery becomes easier when the environment supports discipline instead of destroying it. This is why rebuilding requires intentionality. Growth rarely happens accidentally inside unhealthy surroundings. Emotional healing, confidence restoration, and personal transformation need conditions that support progress consistently. A seed placed in poor soil struggles no matter how much potential exists inside it. Human beings operate similarly. Potential alone is not enough. The environment surrounding a person either nourishes growth or weakens it slowly. Recovery becomes stronger when the environment supports focus, peace, accountability, discipline, and hope. And over time, the right environment does more than change behavior. It changes what a person believes is possible for their future and for themselves. Failure reveals your real character because adversity removes performance and exposes truth. Psychological studies on stress, pressure, and human behavior consistently show that difficult situations uncover emotional patterns people often hide during comfortable seasons. Anyone can appear confident, disciplined, or emotionally strong when life moves smoothly. But pressure changes everything. Pressure exposes patience, integrity, emotional control, resilience, and personal responsibility in ways success alone never can. Comfort allows people to maintain illusion. Failure removes illusion completely. When plans collapse, excuses lose power. When results disappear, character becomes visible. The way a person responds during disappointment often reveals more about identity than years of easy achievement ever could. Some people become bitter immediately, others become reflective. Some blame everyone around them. Others accept responsibility and begin rebuilding. The circumstance may affect many individuals similarly, but reactions reveal internal character differently. This is why adversity becomes such a powerful teacher. Human beings often believe they understand themselves until life becomes difficult. A person may think they are patient until progress slows down. Someone may believe they are disciplined until motivation disappears. Another may think they are emotionally strong until rejection, criticism, or failure challenges their identity directly. Pressure reveals truth quickly. Research in behavioral psychology repeatedly confirms that stressful situations reduce the brain's ability to maintain social masks consistently. Under pressure, people rely more heavily on deeply ingrained habits, emotional conditioning, and core beliefs. This explains why adversity exposes real character more clearly than comfort. Failure reveals how people treat others during frustration. It exposes whether they remain honest when embarrassed. It shows whether they continue working when recognition disappears. It uncovers whether discipline exists beyond temporary motivation. Strong character does not appear suddenly during difficult moments. It is revealed there. This is why personal growth requires honesty after failure. Many individuals spend more energy protecting their ego than examining their behavior truthfully. They blame circumstances, timing, bad luck, or other people because accepting responsibility feels emotionally painful. But avoiding truth prevents growth completely. Character develops when a person becomes strong enough to face uncomfortable reality without running from it emotionally. A failed business may reveal impulsive decision-making. A broken relationship may expose emotional immaturity or lack of communication. Financial struggle may uncover poor discipline and short-term thinking. These truths can feel painful, but awareness creates opportunity for transformation. The strongest people are not those who never fail. They are the people willing to let failure refine them instead of destroy them. Many individuals want success without self-examination. They want confidence without discipline. They want results without emotional growth. But adversity forces reflection because pain interrupts autopilot living. Failure slows people down enough to confront habits, mindsets, and weaknesses previously ignored. This process often feels uncomfortable because identity becomes challenged directly. A person who once felt powerful suddenly feels uncertain. Someone praised for intelligence may experience failure for the first time. Another individual who relied heavily on external validation may feel lost when approval disappears. These moments reveal how much identity depended on unstable foundations. Why? This is where real strength begins forming. Character grows when people stop needing perfection to maintain self-respect. Emotional maturity develops when responsibility becomes more important than ego protection. Integrity strengthens when people continue acting with discipline despite disappointment. Failure also reveals loyalty, humility, and emotional resilience. Some people disappear when success disappears. Others remain committed through difficult seasons. Some individuals collapse emotionally after criticism. Others use criticism as information for improvement. Failure exposes whether identity is rooted in temporary outcomes or deeper internal values. History repeatedly shows that many respected leaders, athletes, creators, and visionaries experience painful setbacks before reaching greatness. What separated them was not talent alone, it was character under pressure. Their response to adversity shaped their future more than the adversity itself. Human beings are often built through resistance, muscles strengthened through stress. Mental resilience develops through challenge. Emotional endurance grows through recovery after hardship. Character forms the same way. Pressure reveals weaknesses first, but reflection and discipline transform those weaknesses into wisdom over time. This is why difficult seasons should not only be feared, they should also be respected. Adversity introduces people to parts of themselves comfort never exposes. It reveals emotional patterns, hidden fears, strengths, priorities, and values. Some discoveries feel painful initially, but truth creates the possibility for real transformation. Failure may damage pride temporarily, but it also creates the opportunity to build stronger character rooted not in appearances, but in discipline, responsibility, resilience, humility, and emotional strength strong enough to survive pressure without losing integrity. Purpose gives pain meaning, because human beings can endure extraordinary harm. De-ship when they believe their suffering is connected to something greater than temporary discomfort. Psychological research on resilience, motivation, and emotional endurance consistently shows that people with a strong sense of purpose often recover faster from adversity, remain disciplined longer, and maintain hope during difficult seasons. Pain without meaning feels unbearable. Pain connected to purpose becomes fuel for transformation. Many people collapse emotionally not because pain is impossible to survive, but because they no longer understand why they should continue moving forward. When direction disappears, suffering feels empty. Effort feels pointless. Discipline becomes difficult to maintain because the future no longer feels connected to a meaningful mission. Purpose changes that completely. Purpose gives struggle direction. It transforms sacrifice into investment instead of punishment. A parent sacrifices sleep for family because love creates meaning. An athlete trains through exhaustion because the goal matters deeply. A leader survives criticism because the mission becomes bigger than personal comfort. Human beings naturally tolerate more pain when purpose becomes emotionally stronger than temporary suffering. This explains why some individuals survive circumstances that appear impossible from the outside. Research in human behavior repeatedly confirms that meaning influences endurance under pressure. Who connect hardship to a larger vision often demonstrate greater emotional resilience under pressure. Their pain still hurts, but purpose changes their relationship with suffering. Instead of viewing hardship as evidence to quit, they begin seeing it as part of growth. Without purpose, pain easily becomes bitterness. A person loses motivation after failure because there is no larger reason to rebuild. Another individual experiences the same failure but continues fighting because the mission still matters. Looks similar, yet internal meaning creates completely different outcomes. Purpose stabilizes the mind during uncertainty. Difficult seasons naturally create emotional confusion. Doubt increases. Fear becomes louder. Progress feels slower. During those moments, purpose acts like an internal compass. It reminds people why they started before emotions became unstable. It keeps discipline alive when motivation fades temporarily. Strong people are rarely driven only by comfort or convenience. They are driven by meaning. Comfort-focused individuals often stop the moment life becomes difficult because pleasure remains the highest priority. Purpose-driven individuals operate differently. They understand that meaningful goals require sacrifice, patience, discomfort, and emotional endurance. Their vision becomes stronger than temporary pain. This is why purpose creates resilience. A person working only for external rewards often loses motivation quickly when obstacles appear. But someone connected deeply to purpose continues even when results are delayed because identity becomes tied to contribution, growth, or long-term vision rather than immediate emotional satisfaction. Purpose also transforms personal suffering into service. Many individuals who experience pain later use those experiences to help others. Someone who overcame financial struggle teaches discipline. A person who survived heartbreak develops emotional wisdom. Individuals recovering from failure often inspire others facing similar battles. Their pain gains meaning because it creates strength capable of serving beyond themselves. Human beings naturally seek significance. People want their struggle to matter. They want hardship to produce wisdom instead of emptiness. Purpose answers that need by connecting present pain to future impact. It allows people to believe their suffering is shaping something valuable instead of destroying them permanently. This mindset changes emotional endurance dramatically. Why? Studies on goal orientation repeatedly show that individuals connected to meaningful long-term visions often tolerate short-term discomfort more effectively. They delay gratification more easily. They remain disciplined longer. They recover faster after setbacks because purpose keeps attention focused beyond present emotion. Purpose also protects identity during failure. When identity depends entirely on outcomes, setbacks feel devastating. But when identity connects to mission and growth, failure becomes part of the process rather than proof of worthlessness. The person still experiences disappointment, but they continue moving because purpose remains alive even when circumstances become painful. That is why purpose matters most during hard seasons, not easy ones. Anyone can feel motivated when life feels comfortable and success arrives quickly. Purpose reveals its power when progress slows, recognition disappears, and suffering becomes unavoidable. It gives emotional strength when comfort disappears completely. Pain alone can make people feel broken. Purpose gives them a reason to rebuild. And over time, the same struggle that once felt unbearable often becomes the very experience that develops wisdom, resilience, compassion, discipline, and emotional strength powerful enough to shape a stronger future than comfort alone ever could have created. Growth requires letting the old you die because transformation is impossible while a person remains emotionally attached to the habits, beliefs, and identity patterns that created stagnation in the first place. Psychological research on behavioral change consistently shows that meaningful personal growth often demands identity reconstruction, not just surface-level improvement. Human beings do not permanently change by adding motivation temporarily. They change when old patterns lose control and new behaviors become part of identity. Many people say they want a different life while still protecting the mindset that keeps them trapped. They want confidence while holding on to insecurity. They want peace while feeding chaos daily. They want success while refusing discipline. They want transformation without sacrifice. But growth has always required separation from the old self. A person cannot create a stronger future while remaining loyal to destructive habits, emotional reactions, and limiting beliefs from the past. This process feels painful because identity becomes involved. The human mind naturally seeks familiarity, even when familiarity creates suffering. Research in neuroscience repeatedly confirms that repeated habits form strong neural pathways over time. The brain becomes comfortable with predictable behavior patterns because certainty feels safer than change. Even unhealthy routines can feel emotionally secure simply because they are familiar. That is why transformation often feels uncomfortable in the beginning. Growth challenges identity directly. Arsan, who spent years procrastinating, must become someone who acts consistently. Someone addicted to external validation must learn internal self-respect. A person controlled by fear must become willing to move despite uncertainty. These shifts require more than temporary inspiration. They require the old emotional patterns to lose authority. In many ways, growth is less about becoming someone new and more about releasing what no longer serves your future. Old excuses must die. Old victim mentalities must die. Old self-doubt must die. Old emotional reactions must lose control. Many people resist transformation because they underestimate the emotional cost of change. They imagine growth as exciting, empowering, and immediately rewarding. Sometimes it is, but often growth feels like loss before it feels like progress. A person outgrows friendships that once felt comfortable. Old routines disappear. Familiar coping mechanisms stop working. Identity begins shifting internally before example. Internal success appears. This creates uncertainty. And uncertainty scares people because the old version of themselves still feels emotionally familiar. Behavioral studies repeatedly show that humans prefer predictable discomfort over unfamiliar growth when fear becomes stronger than vision. This explains why many individuals return to toxic habits even after recognizing the damage they cause. Familiar pain often feels safer than unknown transformation. But strong people understand something important. Every new level of life demands a new version of identity. An athlete cannot compete professionally with amateur discipline. A leader cannot build trust while avoiding responsibility. A person cannot build emotional stability while remaining controlled by impulsive reactions. Growth requires evolution because old patterns cannot sustain new goals. This is why painful seasons often become necessary. Failure exposes outdated behaviors. Heartbreak reveals emotional immaturity. Pressure uncovers weak discipline. Difficult seasons force reflection because comfort no longer hides the truth. The old identity begins collapsing under the weight of reality, and while painful, this collapse creates opportunity. A person rebuilding after adversity often becomes calmer, wiser, and more disciplined because suffering forced self-awareness. They stop chasing temporary validation. They become more intentional with time, relationships, and energy. Their priorities change because pain clarified what truly matters. This transformation rarely happens overnight. Identity changes through repeated action. Every disciplined choice weakens the old version slightly more. Every courageous decision strengthens the new identity gradually. Over time, habits reshape thinking, and thinking reshapes behavior. Eventually, the person no longer feels connected to the mentality that once controlled them. The strongest transformations happen internally before they become visible externally. People may still see the same face, but internally the mindset has changed completely. Emotional reactions become different. Standards become higher. Self-respect becomes stronger. The person stops tolerating behaviors that once felt normal. That is what real growth looks like. Not pretending the old self never existed, but refusing to remain trapped by it. Human beings are constantly evolving through experience, discipline, suffering, reflection, and choice. Every season either strengthens old limitations or creates space for new identity. Transformation begins the moment a person accepts that growth is not about returning to who they once were. It is about becoming someone stronger than the version that existed before the struggle ever began. The comeback begins before results appear because real transformation starts internally long before the outside world notices any visible change. Research in psychology, habit formation, and human performance consistently shows that meaningful. Growth often develops quietly through repeated behavior, emotional resilience, and disciplined thinking before success becomes measurable externally. Most people only recognize a comeback once outcomes become visible, but the true turning point happens much earlier in private moments nobody else sees. Human beings naturally focus on visible evidence. People celebrate championships, promotions, financial success, physical transformations, and public recognition. Yet very few pay attention to the invisible process that created those outcomes. The early mornings without motivation, the lonely rebuilding phase after failure, the quiet routines repeated daily without applause. This hidden process is where the comeback truly begins. Most individuals quit because they expect external proof too quickly. They start improving for a few weeks and become discouraged when life still looks the same. The mind begins questioning whether effort matters because visible results have not appeared yet. This creates emotional frustration because human beings naturally crave confirmation that progress is happening, but growth rarely appears immediately. Studies on behavioral change repeatedly confirm that transformation often happens beneath the surface before becoming externally visible. Habits strengthen gradually. Emotional resilience develops slowly. Discipline compounds over time. The internal shifts usually happen first, while external circumstances take longer to reflect the change. Nature itself follows this pattern. Seeds grow underground before breaking through the surface. Muscles strengthen internally before physical changes become noticeable. Skills improve through repetition long before mastery becomes visible publicly. Human transformation operates similarly. Invisible progress creates visible outcomes later. This is why patience becomes essential during rebuilding seasons. A person recovering after failure may still feel uncertain externally while becoming mentally stronger internally. Someone rebuilding confidence may not yet have visible success, but has already started changing habits, routines, and thought patterns quietly. The comeback begins the moment behavior changes consistently, not when recognition arrives. Many people misunderstand progress because they only measure outcomes. They ignore discipline. They ignore consistency. They ignore emotional growth. Yet these invisible factors eventually shape visible reality more powerfully than temporary motivation ever could. A person becoming more focused daily is already changing even if results remain delayed. Someone developing emotional control during stressful moments is already growing even before life improves externally. The strongest transformations are usually invisible at first. Psychological research on delayed gratification consistently shows that people capable of continuing effort without immediate reward often create stronger long-term outcomes. They understand that progress compounds quietly. One disciplined day seems small. One focused decision appears insignificant. But repeated over time, these actions reshape identity completely. This is where most people fail. They stop during the invisible stage. They mistake slow progress for no progress. They become emotionally discouraged because the external world has not caught up to their internal effort yet. But visible success is often simply delayed evidence of private discipline already happening beneath the surface. Strong people continue anyway. They trust the process before results confirm it publicly. They continue showing up even when recognition disappears. They maintain routines even when life still feels uncertain. This level of emotional endurance separates temporary excitement from true transformation. Confidence also begins rebuilding before success returns. A person who starts honoring small promises to themselves is already changing internally, waking up consistently, exercising despite low energy, staying disciplined without external pressure. These behaviors restore self-respect quietly before visible achievements arrive. Over time, the internal shift becomes impossible to hide. Energy changes, focus sharpens, emotional reactions improve. Opportunities increase because disciplined behavior creates better decisions consistently. Eventually, visible success begins appearing, but by that stage, the real transformation already happened privately long before others noticed. This is why comeback stories often surprise people. The world sees sudden success while missing the invisible preparation phase entirely. They notice the victory, but not the months or years spent rebuilding identity silently. They see confidence, but not the self-doubt overcome privately. They see strength without understanding the suffering that created it. Human beings often underestimate the power of progress because modern culture constantly glorifies instant results. But sustainable growth almost never happens instantly. Lasting transformation requires patience long enough for invisible work to become visible reality. The comeback starts the moment a person refuses to stay defeated internally. Not when applause arrives, not when money returns, not when recognition appears. The comeback begins quietly through disciplined actions repeated consistently while results still remain invisible to everyone else.